Coquette Academia is an aesthetic primarily based on the romanticisation of school and studying. Think preppy, Rory Gilmore, Chiltern energy going forward into the academic year. Photos featuring navy blue, plaid skirts, stacks and stacks of notebooks and writing, Mary Janes, pretty campuses and aesthetic stationery are all what fill Pinterest when you search for this specific aesthetic. It's an aesthetic that feeds very much into the romanticised school, beauty and brains niche, with multiple collages, mood boards and photos being used to cultivate and create an image to the aesthetic. And here is a blog post I actually wrote quite a while back describing the kind of vision I had for this aesthetic and then titling the blog post Coquette Academia. This is quite a popular photo on Pinterest and I'm so glad that people have just read this blog post and resonate with this very, very niche aesthetic. If it provides inspiration and some motivation going forward into the new school year, then I have done something right because that is what it intended to do. In today's deep dive, I'm going to be talking about the Coquette Academia style, lifestyle, art and symbolism, and what differentiates this aesthetic to all of the others. Compared to normal classic Coquette, what makes this aesthetic different? And as with many of my other guides and videos, we're going to be starting with style. It is very easy to recognise the Coquette Academia style because it is so specific. It is very preppy and almost uniform coded and academia coded in a sense. A very specific collection of clothing items make up this really, really individual style, and I'm just going to basically run through them all so you guys can get an idea and a sense of what makes up a Coquette Academia wardrobe. The colour navy blue is very prominent in this style. Things like plaid skirts, blazers, collared shirts, argyle sweaters, turtleneck sweaters, cardigans, oversized v-neck sweaters, tights, knee-high socks, Mary Janes, loafers, satchels, leg warmers, ties and glasses all make up this very academia-driven aesthetic. And what makes it coquette is that it is still focusing on its hyper-feminine qualities. This entire style is very preppy, sometimes even leaning more in towards the old money aesthetic, very, very academia-driven. And that is basically how you identify it on Pinterest when you're scrolling through many other aesthetics and styles. You will see this and be able to recognize it for those things. No aesthetic is complete without a lifestyle, of course, so here are some activities that I think any fan of the Coquette Academia aesthetic would partake in. Studying for long periods of time, collecting aesthetic stationery and striving for really good grades all round, going to coffee shops, having an after-school routine or a romanticised night routine, going to after-school activities, reading, writing extensively, listening to classical music, and visiting places like libraries, museums, and art galleries. These are the niche type of activities you see when you type in this aesthetic name on Pinterest, and these are the things that I can basically imagine people doing. Basically anything academic but with a hyper-feminine twist put onto it and with like a romanticized eye put onto it is something I think that someone who loves this aesthetic would do. Some art and symbolism that you will frequently see whenever you type in this aesthetic name online are things like navy blue. Navy blue is everywhere in this aesthetic, from outfits to just the colour scheme. It is everywhere, as are argyle and plaid patterns. Argyle sweaters are so academic. These are like a staple in any academic aesthetic, I feel, and plaid skirts. Plaid skirts are like the staple symbolism for this style. Preppy style and like academia coded outfits, they're frequently seen everywhere and they're like the main focal point of really being able to pick out this aesthetic amongst others in comparison. Early mornings, I see so many early morning aesthetic photos on Pinterest and it's like waking up early, getting ready to go to work or school. It's that vibe. Autumn is everywhere. I've been making so much content about autumn, but I feel like if there was a season that correlated with the Coquette Academia aesthetic, it would be autumn. Stacks of books and late night reading, studying in places like cafes, parks, libraries, notebooks filled to the brim with cursive writing or like scribbled notes, mugs of tea and coffee in pretty teacups, reading classic literature, being overly organised, having a really organised bag that you are able to take aesthetic photos of because all of the things in it kind of match each other, having matching stationery, books, basically everything matching, and Rory Gilmore and Blair Waldorf. I feel like these two are like the reigning queens of this aesthetic because they are so driven and determined in that academic field. And then finally, last but not least, what makes Coquette Academia different from all of these other academia or coquette styled aesthetics. So whilst traditional coquette doesn't really focus solely on academics and studying, it is more focused on hyperfemininity, romance, soft visuals. Coquette Academia does the opposite of that and is basically the secret weapon that I feel a lot of people can use as motivation for a new academic year or a new start at work. If you still love, though, the hyperfeminine aesthetic and you want to bring that forward with you into a work environment, I feel like Coquette Academia is just the best for this, and it gives us so much visual inspiration and motivation. Something, I said this the other day in a video, something like clocks in our brains whenever we see a pretty campus or a photo of really organised stationery, or we see someone's bag that is just the perfect prime example of a Pinterest organised bag, and we want to achieve that. It's wanting to embrace that traditional saying of beauty and brains, and knowing and kind of letting yourself realise that you can have both. You don't just have to be academically driven and that is it. You can still love all of the beauty that there is to be seen in this world and bring that forward into your studies to make them more enjoyable. That being said, I do just want to point out that this aesthetic is incredibly niche. It is very niche and very vague, and it isn't something like that you can, it's not as well known as Coquette. I mean, it's a sub-brand of Coquette. And it's just something that I kind of wanted a term. I wanted there to be a name for it, so you guys didn't have to just say, oh, I'm romanticizing this school year. No, you are Coquette Academia, and you are going forward and you are motivated, and basically all of these things, this, all of these things are Coquette Academia in my eyes. So take this with a pinch of salt. This is a very vague term, a very new kind of niche, if you will, and it's just something to be taken lightheartedly. So hopefully it gives you some motivation and some inspiration and some comfort going forward into the new school year.